It started one cold November evening in the small town of Greendale, a place where nothing much ever happened, or so I thought. I had just moved there, trying to escape the noise of city life. The streets were quiet, the air crisp with the scent of pine, and the stars shone bright in the sky, untouched by city lights. It was supposed to be peaceful, but what I found was anything but. I was staying in a rundown old house on the outskirts of town. The place had character, but it was too quiet, too isolated. The neighbors? No one seemed to talk much. I didn't mind that, though I was a solitary person by nature. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the house. Something in the way the floorboards creaked at night, or how the wind seemed to whisper through the cracks in the walls. The first sign of trouble came the night I heard knocking at my door. At first, I thought it was just the wind, the kind that makes the old wood of the house groan. But then it came again, 3 hard knocks, followed by a brief silence. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the last time I checked, the house next door had been empty for weeks. I stood still, my breath catching in my throat, wondering if I should check the peephole. But something stopped me. Instead, I did what anyone in my position would do. I stayed quiet and waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. I finally dared to peek out, but there was no one there. The porch light flickered in the distance, casting eerie shadows across the yard. Maybe it was just a prank, I thought, but something told me it wasn't. I locked the door and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. Every little noise in the house seemed amplified in the silence of the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting. The next morning, things only got worse. I found something strange in my mailbox. An old, faded photograph of the house I was renting, taken from the street. It wasn't a photo I recognized, but it had a strange, unsettling quality to it. I could almost feel the eyes of whoever took it, staring at me. I took it inside, trying to brush off the unease crawling up my spine. But I couldn't ignore the growing sense that I wasn't alone here. Not in this house, not in this town. And then, just as I thought I might have imagined it all, I heard a voice. It was a whisper at first, so soft that I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard anything. But then it came again, clearer this time, like someone was standing right behind me. "Leave now." The words sent a chill down my spine, and I spun around, heart pounding in my chest. The room was empty. No one was there. Just the same old creaky furniture and dusty windowsills. I glanced at the clock. It was 3:17 a.m. I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe it was stress, the isolation. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just in my head. The next morning, I tried to forget about the voice. I needed to focus on getting settled in, finding a routine. But as I was unpacking boxes, I came across something else. A note, wedged between 2 old books on the shelf. It was folded neatly, but the handwriting was strange. Uneven, as if written by someone who was nervous or desperate. "You should have left when you had the chance. It's not safe here." I dropped the note in shock, my mind racing. Who would leave something like that? Was it a warning? Or just a cruel joke? I decided to visit the local library that afternoon. The place was small, dimly lit, but full of old books and local history. The librarian, a woman named Mrs. Caldwell, was friendly enough, but she had this strange way of looking at me, like she knew something I didn't. I asked her about Greendale's history, trying to make casual conversation, but she hesitated before answering, her eyes darting to the shelves as if she were searching for something. "Greendale has a long history," she finally said, her voice low, almost too low. "Some things better left forgotten. It's a town that's seen more than its fair share of tragedies." I raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to this than she was letting on. "What kind of tragedies?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice even more. "You're new here, and you'll figure it out soon enough. Just remember, don't trust the woods at night. They've claimed people before, and they'll claim more if you're not careful." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I nodded, trying to act like I wasn't rattled, but inside, my mind was spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The silence outside was deafening, but it was the kind of silence that felt suffocating. like the air itself was holding its breath. I sat in the darkness, staring at the empty doorway, wondering if the voice would come back. And then, just as I thought I might be imagining everything, I heard it again. The same whisper from the night before, as if it had been waiting for me to listen. "Don't go into the woods." I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. The woods, the ones Mrs. Caldwell had mentioned. They were just beyond the backyard, stretching out into the darkness like an endless, shadowy expanse. They hadn't seemed so threatening in the daylight, but now they felt alive, watching. I had to know more. I had to understand what was happening in this place. And so, against every instinct telling me to stay inside, I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, heading toward the woods. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I stepped toward the woods, the beam cutting through the thick night air. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. A cold wind rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a faint scent of decay. It was unsettling, like the forest itself had a secret, one it was begging me not to uncover. But something in me pushed forward. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I was just too terrified to stay in the house any longer. The idea of being alone in that empty, silent place was worse than whatever lay ahead in the woods. As I entered the tree line, the flashlight's beam flickered, casting eerie shadows against the trunks. I pushed the thought of being watched from my mind, but it lingered, nagging at me. The quiet was oppressive, like the air had thickened with every step I took. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was following me. The further I went, the more the woods seemed to close in on me. The trees were dense, their branches interlocking overhead, blocking out most of the moonlight. The path, if you could even call it a path, was barely visible, just a faint trail marked by uneven ground and scattered leaves. I stumbled over a tree root, cursing under my breath. That's when I saw it. A figure, just beyond the light's reach. At first, I thought it was a trick of the mind, the shadows playing with my vision. But then the figure stepped forward, its form becoming clearer. It was a man, or what seemed like one, but there was something horribly wrong about him. He was tall, too tall, with long, spindly arms that hung unnaturally by his sides. His face was gaunt, skin pulled tight over sharp features, and his eyes, black, hollow, like empty sockets staring into me. I froze. The man didn't move, but his gaze locked onto mine, sending a wave of dread through me. I wanted to run, but my body refused to obey. His presence seemed to suffocate the air around me, like I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite a whisper but wasn't a shout either, he spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The words sent a jolt of panic through me, but before I could react, the man tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "You don't belong here," he said, almost as if he were tasting the words. "Leave before it's too late." The warning hit me like a slap, and something deep inside me screamed to turn around and run. But my legs felt like they were made of lead. I was trapped in his gaze, unable to move, unable to speak. And then, just as quickly as it all started, the figure vanished. No rustling of leaves, no footsteps, just gone. My mind raced. I turned around, fumbling with the flashlight, praying it would work, and darted back in the direction I came from. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. I just ran, pushing through the underbrush, branches scratching at my skin. When I finally burst out of the woods, panting, my heart hammering in my chest, I stumbled toward the house, desperate to get inside. But as I reached the door, I froze. There, on the porch, was another photograph. It was the same as the one I had found earlier, but this time it was different. In the corner of the photo, in the background, I could see the figure, the man I had just seen in the woods. His eyes, dark and empty, stared out from the picture. I slammed the door shut behind me, bolting it, and sank to the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The terror I had felt in the woods was still with me, hanging in the air like a thick fog. I didn't know who that man was or what he wanted, but one thing was clear. He had been watching me, and I had no idea how much deeper this nightmare would go. I couldn't shake the image of that man, the way his hollow eyes had bored into mine, how he vanished without a trace. The photo on the porch only made things worse. It was as if something was pulling strings, making sure I couldn't ignore it. But I needed answers. I had to find out what was really happening in this town, and why I felt like I was being hunted. The next morning, I went to see Mrs. Caldwell at the library again. I had to confront her. She knew something, I was sure of it. But this time, I wasn't going to let her deflect with vague warnings. I needed specifics. The library was quieter than usual, with only a couple of elderly patrons browsing through books. Mrs. Caldwell was at the desk, sorting through a pile of papers. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. "You were right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I went into the woods. I saw someone. She didn't blink. I warned you. I wasn't going to let her brush me off." "Who was it?" "That figure. The man." "Who is he?" Her face hardened, and she lowered her voice, glancing around the room as if making sure no one could hear us. "It's not just one man. It's the town. Greendale, it's cursed. People come here, they disappear. Some stay, and others, like him, they don't die. They wait." My stomach twisted in knots. "Wait for what?" "For new blood," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Greendale is a place for lost souls, for the ones who can't leave. And once you've seen him, once you've been touched by it, there's no going back." I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. "What do you mean, touched by it?" She leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly. "The woods, they're alive. They feed on the lost, on the ones who wander too far. And those who leave, they leave changed. Like him. He was never human, not really. And when they mark you, when they choose you, they don't let you go." My mind was racing. This wasn't just some old superstition. It was real. Something about this town, about the woods, had twisted it all into a living nightmare. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking now. "How do I stop it? How do I get out of here?" Her face darkened. "You can't. Once you're marked, there's no leaving. The only way out is death, or worse, becoming one of them." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, worse?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she stood up abruptly, her hands wringing together. "You need to go now. Get out of here, before it's too late." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat and ran out of the library, my mind spinning. There had to be another way. I couldn't just accept this, not without trying. I had to find a way to break free from whatever hold this town had on me. But as I stepped out onto the street, I felt it again. The watching, the suffocating presence, like eyes were on me, following me. My instincts screamed to turn around and run, but there was nowhere to go. Greendale was swallowing me whole. I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. That night, I gathered what little I had left. The house was quiet again, too quiet, but the weight of the silence was different now. It was suffocating. I went to the door, ready to leave, but just as my hand touched the knob, I heard it. The voice. "Don't leave." I spun around, heart pounding in my chest. The voice was familiar now, cold and commanding. It was the man from the woods. I wasn't alone in the house anymore. I turned toward the stairs, my breath coming in short gasps. There, at the top, was the figure. But this time, he wasn't alone. The shadows around him swirled, taking form, revealing others. People, or what had once been people, staring at me with those same hollow, empty eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said again, his voice a low growl. "Now, you'll never leave." The room seemed to close in around me. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, and my legs refused to move. I was trapped, surrounded by things that had once been human, now twisted and broken. I knew then, with chilling certainty, that I was no longer in control. The town had claimed me, the woods had marked me, and I would never be the same again. I stood frozen, staring at the figures in the hallway. The air around me felt thick, like I was wading through water, each breath a struggle. The man from the woods was at the forefront, his eyes darker than ever, almost glowing in the dim light of the house. The others behind him, tall, gaunt, and skeletal, stood motionless, watching me like prey. I couldn't even bring myself to scream. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot by fear and a suffocating sense of inevitability. "You shouldn't have come here," the man repeated, his voice more sinister this time, as if every word carried a weight that pressed down on me. "Now, you belong to Greendale." I tried to move, to back away, but my feet wouldn't obey. My body was frozen in place. Panic surged through me, but it was too late. The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing against me as the shadows around the figures stretched and writhed. They were getting closer, their hollow eyes never leaving mine. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take any more, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Leave her alone." I whipped around, heart pounding in my throat. There, standing in the doorway, was a woman, older, dressed in faded clothes, her face lined with years of struggle and pain. But her eyes were sharp, full of defiance. Who are you?" I managed to choke out, barely able to form words. The woman didn't answer right away. She stepped forward, her hand raised as if to ward off the figures that still surrounded me. "I'm not like them," she said, her voice cracking. "I was once like you, trapped. But there's a way out. You just have to make the right choice." I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean? What's going on here?" The woman looked at the figures, her eyes full of regret. These people, they were lost souls. They were once like us, people who came to Greendale and got caught in the woods. But some of us, we survive. We fight it. The town wants to claim you just like it claimed all of them. She gestured toward the twisted figures in the hall. "But there's a way to escape, to break free. I know how, but it won't be easy." The man from the woods stepped forward, his eyes narrowing with a chilling glare. "You can't escape, and neither can she. Once you're in Greendale's grip, there's no leaving. You are ours." The woman didn't flinch. She continued to stand her ground, her hand outstretched toward me. "You have to trust me," she said urgently. "If you stay, if you let them take you, you'll become one of them. But if you fight, if you come with me, we can leave. I can show you how." I was trembling now, the weight of the decision heavy on my chest. The figures in the hallway were inching closer, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, waiting for me to make my move. I had only moments before they would close in completely. "What do I have to do?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have to go into the woods, the heart of the town, the source of it all. If you destroy it, you break the curse. But it's not easy, and you'll be hunted every step of the way. They will try to stop you, but if you make it to the heart, you'll destroy them." I looked at her, then at the twisted figures, then back at her. I didn't know if I could trust her, but I knew this. Staying here meant certain death, becoming one of them. I didn't have a choice. I nodded. "I'll do it." The woman's face softened, but there was no time for kindness. She grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door. As we moved past the figures, they hissed and growled, but they didn't move toward us. The man from the woods, however, stepped into our path. "You will regret this," he warned, his voice low and full of venom. "Greendale never lets go." But the woman didn't hesitate. She pulled me outside, and we ran into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but there was no time to stop and think. The woman led me toward the edge of the woods, her pace steady, as if she had done this countless times before. I could hear the figures following us, their footsteps barely audible but growing closer with each passing second. "We need to get to the heart of the woods," she said, her voice strained but urgent. "Once we get there, you have to destroy it. The heart is what gives the town its power." I glanced behind us, but the figures had stopped at the edge of the woods, watching us. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, but they didn't follow. For the first time since I'd arrived in Greendale, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could escape. Maybe I could break free. But I knew it wouldn't be that easy. The hardest part was still ahead. The woman, whose name I still didn't know, pulled me through the dark underbrush of the woods, her movements swift, almost too fluid, like she was part of the very night itself. I struggled to keep up, but my legs felt heavy, my breath ragged. The cold air bit at my skin, and the shadows around us seemed to close in tighter with every step. "We're getting close," she muttered, her voice almost drowned out by the sound of leaves crunching beneath our feet. Her grip on my arm tightened as if she was afraid I might falter and give up. I wanted to ask her more, to understand exactly what we were up against. But there was no time. The figures in the house, those grotesque, twisted people, weren't far behind. I could feel their presence in the darkness, like an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made my heart race. "Keep moving," she urged, glancing over her shoulder. "Don't stop. Whatever happens, don't look back." I nodded, but my mind was clouded with fear and confusion. We were heading deeper into the woods, further from the house, and I could feel something changing. The air had grown heavier, thicker, as if the very forest was alive, watching us. "Where are we going?" I asked, struggling to catch my breath. "The heart of the town," she said grimly, "where it all began." We reached a clearing, the trees parting to reveal a vast, empty space. At the center of it, there was a stone circle, ancient and worn, covered in moss and lichen. The ground beneath our feet was cracked, with faint lines of red running through it, like veins pumping blood through the earth. I couldn't help but shudder. The air was thick with something old and malevolent. This was the place. I could feel it deep in my bones. The woman stopped and turned to face me. "This is it. The heart. The center of Greendale's power." I glanced around, my stomach churning. The stone circle was surrounded by twisted, blackened trees. Their branches twisted into unnatural shapes, as if they were reaching for the sky in silent agony. The ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse, almost like it was alive, thrumming with dark energy. "Now what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she walked slowly toward the center of the circle, her eyes scanning the ground as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Finally, she knelt down and placed her hand on one of the stones. Her fingers brushed against the cracked surface, and for a moment, nothing happened. But then, the ground trembled, and the air grew cold. So cold that I could see my breath misting in front of me. "Do it," she said quietly, looking up at me. "Destroy the heart. Break the seal." I stepped forward, unsure, my heart hammering in my chest. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to destroy something like this? The stone circle? The trees? The very earth beneath me? It felt like I was standing at the edge of something that shouldn't be disturbed, like I was about to unleash something far worse than the twisted figures chasing us. "Trust me," she urged, her voice steady but urgent. "It's the only way." I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I reached for the closest stone. My fingers brushed against it, and a sharp pain shot through me, as though the stone itself was alive, reaching for me, pulling me in. I jerked back in pain, but the stone seemed to have a grip on me, and my vision blurred. "Don't resist," the woman said. "It's already marked you." I closed my eyes, trying to push past the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume me. I had no choice. If I didn't do this, I would be swallowed by Greendale just like all the others. I reached out again, this time with everything I had. I slammed my palm against the stone, and the ground beneath me cracked open with a deafening roar. The sky above us turned black, the stars vanishing as a violent wind whipped through the clearing. The stone circle pulsed with an unnatural light, and the trees around us writhed in agony. The ground itself seemed to scream as the earth beneath us shattered, sending debris flying into the air. Then, from the depths of the broken earth, a figure rose, taller than anything I had ever seen, its face a swirling mass of shadow and malice. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were glowing red, and its form seemed to shift and twist, as though it were made of smoke and nightmare. The woman stumbled back, her face drained of color. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice filled with fear. "We've awakened it. The heart of Greendale is a curse, and now you've released it." The figure loomed over us, its presence suffocating, its power overwhelming. The forest seemed to groan in response, as if the very earth had been wounded. I could feel the weight of its gaze, the coldness of its hunger. And in that moment, I realized the truth. There was no escaping this place. Greendale would consume us all. The shadowed figure loomed over us, a nightmare come to life, its presence heavier than the air itself. I could feel its darkness wrapping around me, suffocating every thought, every ounce of resistance. The woman, her face pale, terror written in every line of her expression, staggered back, her hands trembling as she looked at the twisted creature now rising from the earth. "We've awakened it," she whispered again, her voice barely a breath. "The heart, it's not just a curse. It's a living entity. It feeds. It grows stronger with every soul it claims." I couldn't move. My legs felt like stone, frozen by fear and the overwhelming pull of the darkness. The creature before us was not just some figment of terror. It was alive, alive in a way that defied reason, a force of pure malice, fed by everything that had been lost in Greendale. It had been waiting, growing, feeding on those who had come and stayed, those who had never left. "We have to destroy it," the woman said suddenly, her voice urgent despite the fear. "We can still stop it. We can still stop it. If you help me." I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was dry, and the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed, caught in the gaze of the creature, and in that moment, I knew it could see every fear, every regret. It knew me. It knew all of us. The woman staggered forward, reaching for the ground where the broken earth still pulsed with dark energy. She grabbed something, a small, jagged rock, its surface glowing with an unnatural light. "We have to destroy the heart," she repeated, holding it up toward the creature, her voice growing steadier, as if drawing strength from the last vestiges of hope. "The heart of Greendale, the source of its power." With a strength I didn't know I had, I forced myself to move. My legs felt like lead, but I ran toward her, desperation flooding every part of my being. "What do we do? How do we kill it?" I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of the terror threatening to tear me apart. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a strange resolve. "We destroy the heart that lies at the center of the curse, the very thing that ties it all together. The stone, it must be shattered. Everything connected to it will break." I nodded. It was our only chance. I didn't know what else to do. The earth rumbled again, and the shadowed figure let out a low, guttural growl, as if sensing our intentions. Its form twisted, a horrific amalgamation of shifting shadows, growing larger, angrier. The woman pressed the jagged rock into my hand. "Use it. Break the stone circle. Break the source. Destroy it." I swallowed hard, looking at the stone. The jagged edges seemed to pulse with the creature's dark power. I could feel it, a deep, sickening hum that reverberated through my entire body. There was no turning back. I lifted the rock, aiming for the center of the circle, where the largest stone stood, still glowing with an eerie red light. The moment the rock struck the stone, a deafening roar split the air. The ground beneath us cracked wide open, and the figure let out a sound that was part scream, part howl. The trees surrounding us howled in agony, their branches twisting and breaking. The very air itself seemed to shudder as if it was being torn apart. For a moment I thought we had failed. The stone seemed to absorb the blow, and the creature lunged forward, its darkness reaching for us with every step. But then, the stone shattered, splintering into countless pieces, and the earth trembled violently. The ground shook so violently that I was thrown off my feet, landing hard on the cracked earth. And then the silence came. The creature, no longer a thing of shadow, no longer a being of darkness, dissolved into nothing, its form evaporating like mist under the first light of dawn. The stone circle collapsed into the earth, the jagged pieces crumbling and turning to dust. I gasped for breath, my heart hammering in my chest. The woman was gone. She had vanished along with the creature, consumed by the very thing she had tried to destroy. She had given everything, and now she was gone. The forest, once alive with its eerie presence, was silent. The oppressive weight that had hung over Greendale for so long seemed to lift, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I stood alone in the clearing, surrounded by the remnants of the curse, the broken stones, and the dissipating fog. The wind had stopped. The air felt still, almost empty. The nightmare was over. But I knew, deep down, that Greendale would never be the same. It had taken so much, claimed so many lives, and for a brief moment it had tried to claim me. I didn't know how many more souls were trapped here, or if the curse was truly gone. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to leave. With one last glance at the clearing, at the shattered stones, I turned and walked away. The path behind me was quiet, and the town seemed to whisper in the distance, but I didn't turn back. I didn't want to know if it had been truly destroyed or if something else lingered, waiting for the next soul to wander in. But I would never return to Greendale, and I would never forget what happened here.